Why? To find if it's useful to you, to think about if there is anyone, any Alex or Sophia or John or anyone else who might benefit from that, from bank, government, or ISP or anyone else. And then also to get engaged with the GFCE more. Because what we do expect and we hope is that you can either benefit from the GGPs we saw there, you can maybe replicate some of them or join them, or you can share your own experiences for the next rounds of the GGPs, and that would be really much appreciated to share because the GFCE is basically a platform for sharing the knowledge and sharing the experience. I think I'll stop there, and we can move to the pitches. Now, we have 5 practical GGPs and 1 more strategic GGP that we are going to present today. Since it's quite an amount of pages and work in all of that, we kindly asked all of our representatives here to try to do a pitch of 3 minutes, to try to persuade you, to get your attention, to read their pages in the document, to find out more about them and hopefully approach them and say, we want to share this, we want to join this, we want to replicate, we want to learn more. We have something to share with you. So ask the representatives or the presenters listed over here to take the floor, please. I'll go one by one as I read, and then we can, I think you can already take the floor and take the seat here. So we'll hear from Alexander Seger from Council of Europe about the experience on capacity development of law enforcement institutions when it comes to using a specific approach of regional hubs. Then we'll hear from Monsieur Ito from Cyber Green Initiative about health metrics. How do we make sure that we know what are the vulnerabilities, that we have solid data and we know how to mitigate it and share? Then we'll hear from Caroline from the Oxford Center on maturity model, a specific way to assess the capacities for cybersecurity in your country, one of the models that exist. Thomas from the Netherlands will help us understand what is or show the practical tool that can help us understand what are the standards, security standards we might be missing in our system. Carrie-Anne will help us with specific campaigns on cybersecurity awareness raising. I'm sure all of you have been thinking about raising awareness, but how do we do it in the best way? And last but not the least, one of those strategic global good practices, Petra will tell us about some practices when it comes to critical information infrastructure protection. I will try to be fair to all of you and interrupt you after 3 minutes. Well, at least give a signal that we've gone through. So try to keep within time. Alex, you want to start first?
Thank you. About 30 years ago, I was computerizing the UN in Vienna. And in the run-up to the UN Crime Congress in Cuba in 1990, I was asked to give some inputs. So in the, I guess it's called Havana Declaration from 1990, you already find a reference to the need for technical assistance regarding crimes against computers. So the idea of technical assistance is not new. But nothing happened much for the next 15 years or so. In 2006, when we started seriously, by the time I was at the Council of Europe, to deal with capacity building on cybercrime, we were very much alone. And then Microsoft joined us, public-private, very good. And then other governments and others joined us. And I'm very happy that today, capacity building on cyber security, cybercrime is mainstreamed. Is also mainstreamed in technical assistance. So it has taken a long time, almost 30 years, but I think we have made huge progress. Capacity building, as you know, is supporting a process of change. You have a situation A, you want to go to a situation B, or a government or an institution want to go to situation B, and capacity building is to support this process of change. I would even say capacity building is masterminding a process of change. Very important. So there are several ingredients that are needed or practices that have come up and that I want to present 1 or 2 of them here from the Council of Europe experience dealing with cybercrime as a matter of criminal justice. An important thing we need is commitment. For us, Council of Europe, we focus on those countries that are committed to implement the Budapest Convention so that we can select among the 200 or so countries. We select those that are committed to join the Budapest Convention. We focus our resources on those countries. And then we need commitment. We have commitment, but we also need ownership. And for the ownership, what we developed over the last 10 years or so is in each country that we work, we ask the government to establish a country project team. You find one of the good practices are the country project teams. So we have in about 25, 30 countries that we work, we have in each country team representing the cybercrime unit, representing a prosecution service, representing the Ministry of Justice, police training academies, judicial training academies, and so on. So in each country we have 5, 6, 7, sometimes thirds are also involved, 5, 6, 7 country team, institutions in a country team. So if we have a project like the Global Action on Cybercrime extended with about 10 priority countries, we can work already with about 50 to 70 institutions at the same time and move in a coherent way in a similar direction. Take an example from the region, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka joined the Budapest Convention about 3 or 4 years ago. And we have now a country team there. We trained 2 years ago under Glazy 10, 20 police officers, and they then trained another 600 police officers. We trained a few judges as trainers, and they train now through the judicial training institution there hundreds of other judges. This is the approach. And now, and this is the other good practice here, is we take this a step further. Having worked with Senegal in West Africa, Morocco in North Africa, Mauritius in Southern Africa, Sri Lanka, Philippines, and so on. We now work with these countries as hubs, as regional hubs. So through Sri Lanka, we work with countries of South Asia. Nepal, recently we had an event there, and so forth. With Senegal, we work in West Africa. With Mauritius, we work in East Africa. So these countries not only have taken the ownership by having these country teams, but they also take ownership to transmit and share their experience in their respective regions. This is what I had to tell.
Thank you, Alex. Short and sweet. If you want to know more about it, of course, approach Alex or download the document and simply search for #regional tabs. That's short name for this practice. And then you also see next to it their practice about national teams, what Alex also mentioned. Okay, moving on to Yuri. Yuri, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me to speak with you. I love pitching, so it's great. Today I'll be presenting on producing and presenting trusted metrics on cyber health, cyber ecosystem health. First and foremost, the most important thing. First and foremost, the prevention of cyber incident is contingent on a healthy cyber ecosystem. The internet is currently infected by many types of cyber diseases, such as bot and malware infections. Even worse, this number is increasing because of the vulnerabilities that exist due to misconfiguration, system outdatedness, and inadequate risk mitigation and preventions. So resulting systemic risk conditions are susceptible the resulting system risk conditions are susceptible of becoming catalyst of staging cyber attacks on others, including those within your ecosystem. So how can we efficiently and effectively improving our cyber ecosystem health? The first steps to improving the cyber ecosystem health are understanding the cause of conditions that pose risks to the internet, and then accurately measuring those systemic risks, and providing metrics in order to focus mitigations and cleanup efforts. Existing cybersecurity practice focusing on a minimally processed raw data is useless to anyone but a particular niche of technical operators. Highly quality and more actionable data should be turned into metrics and made digestible to a broader audience, including policymakers. What do these metrics ultimately do? They allow for prioritization. They can assist CERTs in communicating with partners and providing a trust picture on the conditions of their networks. And operators and companies can enhance their skills for understanding and prioritizing risks. These metrics can also help decision makers in corporation assess risks and gather resource for mitigation. There are three questions that most of the serious the chief security officer asks. One, are we managing risks? Two, are we better off than we were last month? Three, how do we compare with other competitors? Metrics should help answering those questions to support their decision making. Most importantly, metrics allow for common, simple language to be spoken about the technical topics that might be otherwise difficult to grasp for policymakers and decision makers. The existing implementation of this practice is cyber-green metrics. Our statistics metrics features metrics-based measurement and visualization, as well as the ability to compare across countries and autonomous systems. How can you implement this practice? Cyber-green is actually seeking for local partners to be the local hub of its constituents for more localized metrics. Similar to the way that WHO World Health Organization is working with the CDCs, and the CDC work with the local clinics in public healthcare. Local partners such as internet service providers and CERTs, IRIs can help with understanding local factors and feed them into the normalization method. So cyber-green can provide support on how to set up local centers of the cybersecurity, cyber health, with a data, statistics platform, visualizations, and health state analysis report. Reach out to me and let's start developing cyber health metrics and the Center of Cyber Ecosystem Health together.
Thank you, Yuri. So if you don't know how to wrap the complicated data into metrics or the report of where are the vulnerabilities, that's the way to go. Again, you can browse to the document for health metrics and other two good practices of cyber-green, or you can simply Google cyber-green and you'll get to Yuri or catch her somewhere in the corridors. Okay, Caroline, the maturity model.
Okay, so we heard a lot about how important cybersecurity capacity building is on a national level, what it means, what are the priorities, but how now on a very practical level, how to know what cybersecurity capacity building is needed on a national level, how to set priorities, which priorities should be set, and where to invest. So these are questions which the maturity model can help to assess cybersecurity capacity maturity and to identify gaps, but also to identify where countries may be strong and maybe also can be maybe even a leader in this field. So the cybersecurity capacity maturity model for nations, short CMM, which I present as a best practice in itself, but also it includes a lot of good practices. Looks at a very broad spectrum of issues regarding cybersecurity capacity. And we're talking about 5 dimensions: a cybersecurity policy and strategy, cyber culture and society, cybersecurity training, education and skills, legal and regulatory frameworks, and standards, organizations, and technologies. So using this model, deploying this model in a country can help the government, but also other stakeholders to better understand the maturity, cybersecurity maturity in a country, and to understand the priorities. Each of these dimensions includes factors and aspects, which kind of like makes a bit more concise. And for all of these aspects, there are indicators which define 5 stages of maturity. starting with startup, formative, established, strategic, and dynamic. And at the end, country knows, okay, where it has to improve. It's not a ranking, it's really for decision making. It's not comparing one country with the other, and really give something into your hand, in the country government's hand to show around. The methodology to deploy the CM is also I think is a good practice, because it brings together in 3 days stakeholders from different stakeholder classes from all the government, policymakers, law enforcement, CSIRTs, civil society, international organizations, etc., who come together in focus group discussions to talk about those different dimensions and the underlying aspects. It's also always can become a very fruitful exercise for all stakeholders in the country to better understand cybersecurity capacity, maturity, and to make the right decisions. And so this is like also sharing of knowledge between stakeholder groups, and it's deployable in every country, possible country. What is also good practice in this context is that this model is deployed with international regional partners. The Organization of American States used it for a regional study, and they're planning to do a second round. We're working with the World Bank. We are kind of like also coordinating if different players want to do assessment in several same countries. We kind of flag if they are kind of duplication. I think that's one of the most important things which wasn't mentioned yet. There's the challenge of duplication of efforts. And yes, I think beyond the 3 minutes. So there are some of our partners here in the room. Even a couple of my colleagues are around today and the next days. And yeah, please don't hesitate to get in contact with us.
That's okay.
We also have the cybersecurity capacity portal. It's very easy to find on Google, where you can find this model. It's a public source. There are also some of the reports which are public, so we encourage to share those reports. We have done 20 so far. I think about 10 are published, as well as a study from the US. And the cybersecurity capacity portal shows our work, but also the work of, I think, most of the players who are in the room and much more. And we also work with the GFCE on an inventory of regional and global capacity building initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. So if you're going into capacity building for your country, make sure that before that you do the assessment, what you already have. And one of the ways to do that is the maturity model. Okay, moving on to a very practical tool for making sure that you actually adhere to standards, which are many. Are you actually implementing them? Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Vlad. Our best practice, good practice, is in conjunction with using cybersecurity standards. One of the parts which are defined in the global agenda. Next slide, please. Yes, the standards we are talking about, on which I'm going to talk about the testing tool, testing these standards, are basically 3 main features which we test. That is the internet connection, email security, to try to avoid phishing, spam, and all other kind of nefarious things. And it's the security of the website. Is the website secure? Is it authentic? Is it the website it says it is? And also, is the website encrypted from A to B, let's say, between the user and the website itself? So these standards are basically improving cybersecurity, and they're improving it on a global perspective. These standards have been developed by the IETF, Internet Standards. They have a very global perspective. Practically, I think everybody of you is using email, is using browsers to get to websites. So if we can do anything at all to improve the security, probably the whole humanity will benefit from this. So just going back one, please. Yes, and it's very important to notice that implementing these standards has to be done also by a very variety of players. And not only ISPs, who are responsible for the internet connection, but practically every organization, government, business who is communicating with citizens, users, whatever, because they provide a website, they provide some kind of authentication and let's say features in the website to interact with an organization, but also they are emailing to users. Next slide, please. So one of the global good practices from this initiative is using a testing tool which looks at the performance of a website, a domain used for either a website, either email. It's also used to test whether your connection is secure. If you go to internet.nl, it's globally applicable. There is an English version of this. For example, you can, and I've made this example to get the GFCE.com through the test, which is the next slide. Next slide, please. Next. And well, not without any surprise, but it's 100% compliant. But it's so what is basically the use? Let's say what is the benefit of this testing tool? It's not only for let's say to use by technicians or by people in organizations to test whether they are compliant, and if they are not compliant, they can go to the website. They can. In the Dutch model, we have people from various Dutch internet organizations working on a non-profit basis to help organizations to implement these standards. But it's much more than a testing tool. It's also, and I think I refer also to Yuria, this is about transparency. This is about making transparent what the performance is from basically not an organization, but a complete sector. You can also measure, in theoretically, a complete nation, whether it complies to certain, let's say, up-to-date standards like this one. So it's not only a testing tool, but we use it also to generate reports. Reports for, in the Dutch situation, all ICT providers who have been together in association, they have been used this. Oh, sorry. They have also used this. One very good example is in the Dutch case, municipalities. There was one reporter who used this test tool to measure 50 major municipalities. It was lousy, to be honest. It has driven our Minister of Interior Affairs to talk with government agencies, municipalities, and we see now after a year that email, in this case it was email security, has improved very much. So you can use it for peer pressure, you can use it for performance measurement, and it's very scalable. We have a project now deriving from this testing tool and other global practices to enter into a project of 2 years in which we will globally try to expand the use of this testing tool and also to have all kinds of other, let's say, technical and other training sessions, not only for awareness, but also for real implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. So if you haven't tried your websites and emails yet, to see how you are standing with standards, do it as soon as possible. But you can also find out how to use this practice more widely, as Thomas mentioned, if you go to the document of global good practices. Carry on. Moving on to raising awareness. This is one of the ways to raise awareness, but there is much more on the campaigns. Carry on.
So picture a world where all our citizens are aware. That's the kind of the pitch that I was to start with. I'll step away from that and be a little bit more formal. So our best practice was focusing awareness through a Cyber Awareness Month. And this initiative is with the OAS, the US, and Canada. And what is it? It's a month dedicated to cybersecurity topic, where the goal is to actually mobilize all the actors within a country to actually focus on cybersecurity awareness initiatives, activities, and to actually raise the level of awareness among citizens, especially, and all the stakeholders. What the practice has been is that once we've decided on the month, a theme is actually dedicated to each week. And within that week and each theme, we actually center a lot of activities around the theme, whether it be online, whether it be through Twitter, whether it be through webinars. We try to focus it that way. What's the value added? It actually allows all the actors to be engaged. It allows persons within schools, private sector, civil society, everyone to actually be part of the process. And it allows stakeholders to share and leverage resources. So we wanted to give you an example of what Cyber Awareness Month 2017 looked like for the OAS, the US, and Canada. So first of all, we actually decided to make it be a joint effort. So it was a series of coordinated events leading up to October, which was Cyber Awareness Month. So for example, we actually had a regional launch in Uruguay, actually preempting the month to begin. We also had a series of social media campaigns that was actually pushed through the National Cybersecurity Alliance, which is US-based. And during that time, we had a coordinated social media plan. So all the actors, we were in a series of meetings for months, actually coming up with a global agenda. And October this year in DC, we had the global launch of Cyber Awareness Month. What made it global is that we tried to have on the agenda a wide variety of persons speaking. And we were actually able to secure someone from the African Union. We had someone from the White House speaking. We had some of our member states coming across. We have a minister from Guatemala who was able to actually participate and speak as well. The cool thing about the month was that we actually had a social media room. So we're actually doing Facebook Live interviews at the same time. We had multiple persons Twittering. We had predetermined tweets that were to go out on each panels. We also had in the morning a media panel where we actually invited the media to a room and tried to educate the media about Cyber Awareness Month. Another thing that we did is the day before the global launch, we invited civil society for a roundtable discussion to raise the awareness with civil society on what cybersecurity is and the need to actually have a month dedicated to it. So aside from the launch, throughout the month, we had a series of activities, and some of them involved Facebook Live interviews around the topics. Like one of the themes was dedicated to actually having a cybersecurity career. And we had persons who were speaking about how they actually started their career in cybersecurity. So from our end, we're hoping that we could pitch that persons throughout the region, India and other regions represented here, would start to think about cyber awareness by having a dedicated month. We would actually call it #Cyber Month. And we actually had #CyberAware, and we had dedicated tweets that you could actually follow from year on year to see how the movement is actually growing. Thank you.
Thank you. So out of 12 months, you can devote one at least to raising awareness about cyber security. And if you do that, there are some tips and tricks they can share. Petra, at the end, when it comes to the critical information infrastructure? Sure.
Yes, critical information infrastructure protection, CIIP in short, forms the link between cybersecurity and national security. CIIP is about the elements of cyberspace that create a risk to a nation. When these elements fail, they have a significant impact on the economy, but also on the society. CIIP includes all activities that aim to ensure critical elements of cyberspace, but also to deter threats, and also to minimize the impact of the incidents. Nations all over the world developed approaches to protect their CIIP. However, there are several basic steps. CIIP starts with the national security perspective and the identification of critical infrastructure in general. Only when those steps are taken, it is possible to identify a nation's critical information infrastructure and develop really a CIRP policy. The dynamic nature of cyberspace makes that nations have to improve their CIRP policy continuously. Critical information infrastructure is often owned by different organizations. The CIRP playing field is complex. So developing a CIRP policy can therefore not be done by governments alone. CIRP activities must be supported by information sharing initiatives. The good practices developing or improving CIRP is a challenge. The Meridian and the GFCE have therefore taken the initiative to develop good practices on CIRP. Based on examples from all over the world, these good practices support development but also implementation of a CIRP policy. There is a large overview of good practices, and I will just highlight a few. So nations have many concerns, but security is priority. CIRP must be made a national security priority. A good practice is therefore to make a CIRP a national security priority. Actually, CIRP is a core element of a national cybersecurity strategy. So the identification of critical information infrastructure is challenging. A good practice is to use definitions from other nations and tailor them to your own country. This helps to avoid time-consuming discussions on the definitions of CI. Also, it is important to involve other stakeholders during development of a CIRP policy. A good practice is to involve stakeholders through exercises. Exercises help to explore the role of different stakeholders in CIRP. So CIRP is complex. This also makes that coordination is necessary for a successful CIRP policy. A good practice is to start a coordinating body for CIRP. An example of a coordinating body is the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center established in India. This is the national agency of the Indian government for coordinating all activities in respect of critical information infrastructure protection. This agency coordinates with all internal and international stakeholders for protecting the critical information infrastructure of India. So what information infrastructure is critical may change quickly. Technology that is used today is outdated next year. Maintaining insight in trends and technologies is key. So it's a good practice to keep ahead of the CII development, for example, by expert pools. So these are actually only a few of the good practices collected by the Meridian and the GFCE. CIRP is an important topic within the global agenda, and we look forward to implement the good practices. Thank you.
Thank you. So this was a snapshot of what's in the Global Good Practices collection. Once again, go to the website. Don't make us print everything. We have to be environmentally friendly. So go to the website, browse through, find what's of your interest. Try to get engaged. Contact the people. Share with them your thoughts. Share with them your practices. Ask them if you need any advice. Join them in their efforts within the GFC. And at the end, I really want to thank all of the initiatives, not only you, but your teams as well, and the GFC community. It was amazing, comprehensive, and very inspiring process of coming to at least these number of global good practices. And I'm sure that there is a lot of space to continue with that. As the GFCE will most likely get more and more initiatives, as the current initiatives will have more and more good practices, there is a lot of space to continue this. There can be some improvements in the whole process in getting into more tangible practices, but there is a lot of space to continue, and I hope to see, well, all of us in this next steps of the process. And I'll close on that and leave it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir, and thanks to the panel for an excellent set of presentations. Distinguished guests and participants, I think on behalf of India and as co-chair, it's my pleasure to make a few closing remarks now. While clearly this is a very young organization, GFCE, I think it's very interesting and very exciting to see the kind of participation that we have been able to bring together, the depth of expertise and the diversity of participants who were there on both the panels. I think we all have very diverse perspectives. We have very diverse experiences. We have different ecosystems that we are dealing with. But we are clearly united in our common mission of ensuring security and resilience of the global cyberspace. Today, I think we've had some very interesting sessions. Mr. David's presentation on the global agenda on cyber capacity building had spelled out the objectives, the process that was followed, consultation and discussions with the entire community. I think there is now need to also prepare a further action plan to implement the global agenda that has been developed. The first panel had highlighted some very important aspects. One, that cyberspace is clearly a great enabler for governments and businesses. It serves as an excellent integrator for society at a global level. No single government or no company, no single organization has the capacity or the resources to take care of the global challenges. The medium itself transcends all kinds of boundaries, and we need partnerships to be able to deal with the challenges as well as the opportunities that this presents. In India, we are painfully aware of the need to first get everyone to participate in cyberspace. We still have a significant part of the population which is not adequately connected with the internet. So is the case with many of the developing countries. So this is also a point which I think had come out. And also, as we spread the access to internet, the need to keep it extremely secure and safe, not just for the adults, but even for children, so that we keep trust alive in the entire framework of ICT and cyberspace. One of the areas that was identified was the capacity building requirement for law enforcement agencies and the judiciary. Currently, the people engaging in cybercrime are doing so quite confidently. The prosecution, and especially successful prosecution, is still eluding us in most of the geographies. The need to actually build capacity in that area is extremely important. As we expand our cyberspace, as we expand our reach, the recourse to cybercrime is also increasing, and it's increasing quite significantly. So we need a coordinated kind of a response there, and possibly GFCE can play a role in building capacities in this area. Another very interesting point that had come out clearly was the concept of cybersecurity by design. That even as we design new products and new services, the elements of cybersecurity need to be inbuilt. They need to be there as a matter of design. We are leaving far too many things on to the reaction to something that happens. And that is far costlier than building it each and every time into the design itself in the requirements and design phase. That will turn out to be the most sustainable and the most cost-effective model. Looking at the way forward, I think we do need to request the GFCE members and stakeholders to participate actively in development of the action plan for implementing the global agenda for cyber capacity building. We also need greater participation in coming out with new initiatives, in actually participating in building capacities and sharing knowledge, expertise, and the best practices. The identified good practices are extremely interesting, and I think they are very, very useful for a much wider community. We need to supplement these with relevant tools and implementation guidelines so that they become easy to replicate and deploy. And we have to think through how to garner the resources that will be needed for a much wider replication, dissemination, and use of the good practices. For new and emerging technologies, once again, there is need to understand both the challenges and the opportunities. As the challenges unfold, it is capacity building which can help us convert these challenges into opportunities. And in areas like IoT, blockchain, artificial intelligence, even as the action is unfolding, I think we should start being active and not just reactive to these. Another aspect which I have observed is that while 4 major themes were identified by GFCE for initial focus, most of the current GFCE initiatives have been on cybersecurity and to some extent on cybercrime. The themes of e-governance and data protection that were initially identified also need attention. It would be great if members, both from countries and intergovernment organizations, from companies, come out with initiatives to activate the remaining 2 thematic areas as well. From India, I'm sure we would like to share a number of experiences we have had in, for instance, in building our identity database Aadhaar and making it a great tool for provision of all kinds of services and taking the benefits of many of our government programs with the help of something which was not initially intended for that purpose. And finally, I would like to thank my co-chair for having given great leadership to the entire initiative. Sitting here in India, I have been able to contribute only to a much lower extent, but Ms. Carmen Gonsalves has put in tremendous amount of effort in stitching the entire organization and stitching all these initiatives together. My great appreciation and thanks also to the GFCE Secretariat, which it's difficult to believe that it is just a 4-member secretariat that has actually in a short time put so many initiatives and so many of the good practices together and worked hard to bring everyone onto the platform. From just 42 members that we started with, it's great to see that we have grown to 63 members already. So my appreciation once again, I think we should provide some applause for both the co-chair and the secretariat. Also my thanks to the speakers, the panelists, and the presenters, and also the delegates who are here. And once again, before I close, I would like to once again extend a very warm welcome to you. I hope you stay on and be a part of GCCS 2017. Thank you.
Dear Mr. Secretary, dear GFCE community in the room, first of all, I would like to thank you all for your presence and contribution today. Would like to thank, of course, also on my behalf, all the speakers, panelists, moderators who exchanged their wealth of experience and sharp insight with us. There's little I can add to the excellent recap of the day provided by Mr. Jay Shawnee. But what I can just, off the top of my head, there are just a few things that spring to my mind that are worth sharing on top of that, because it was a rich day and a lot of a rich discussion and definitely a lot of takeaways that struck me as very helpful. A couple of these takeaways are, for example, and this was also already mentioned by Sani, the importance of developing toolkits to facilitate further implementation of good practices and guidelines identified within the GFCE, toolkits for universal use, of course. The second place, the need to develop a proper, sound methodological tool to assess, evaluate the impact of capacity building endeavors. I think that's indeed a very good piece of advice. That, by the way, also brings in another good insight that was shared with us during the very end of the discussion about international cooperation and capacity building, when we asked about where should the GFCE be in a couple of years' time. And then there was the very understandable and relevant call for more concrete results and more hard evidence of all the benefits of what we're doing here. That's of course always the ultimate challenge, that when we develop good practices and implement very useful projects, that we have to ensure that these takeaways, the assessment of the results, is as tangible as possible, because this again will help us to increase awareness about the importance of capacity building and the need for the appropriate resources even more. And this need is there. That's also one of the reasons, of course, that we're here as a GFCE community, here during the important global conference on cyberspace, where there are lots of political decision makers. So that's our tasking for this week, to ensure that all these political and high-level decision makers around go home convinced about the need for capacity building and more resources for capacity building. So take that as a personal assignment this week, please. It's for all of us. Because indeed, there are already some very encouraging examples lately of good practices that can help you to increase budgets. The Cyber Ambassador of Australia recall that when he was developing or by developing an international engagement strategy, he was able to up resources considerably. So that's also a very good piece of advice. I would like to end my short recap here. There's one interesting element that I forgot to mention. I'm sorry, I will do that now. There was also the suggestion, a very helpful suggestion, that we should somehow organize in a more structural manner within the GFCE the sharing of experiences with capacity building and the implementation of projects. So we're also going to look into that. This all being said, this brings me to the following, and this has already been mentioned today, in the next 2 days, we hope to wrap up work on the communique on the agenda, on the global agenda for capacity building. This communique is a cogent, relatively short text that will provide us with a recap of our capacity building priorities and the underpinning guidelines and principles, and that will provide us with the necessary guidelines and guidance to implement this ambitious capacity building agenda. So I would like to thank all of you, GFCE community, who have helped us draw up that communique, which hopefully will see the light, or I'm pretty sure it will, on Friday during the afternoon. I think it's at 1:30 that we're going to present the communique. So please come and be there. This is an important moment, milestone for the GFCE. Before wrapping up, I would first of all like to wholeheartedly thank my co-chair, Mr. Secretary Ajay Sahani, who has not only been a generous host to all of us today, but also contributed and contributes a lot in a wealth of experience and insights to the GFCE. I think the GFCE has been enriched since we have taken you, since we have embraced you as our co-chair, India, during our annual meeting earlier this year. That was definitely a decisive step forward for the platform. I would like to thank your team as well, of course, wonderful supporting team. Many of them are in the room. I would also like to join in your praises, of course, for the GFCE Secretariat, David, Mario, Wouter, Manon, and Diana for organizing this event and the upcoming GCCS session on Friday. And I would, of course, not like to leave this room without thanking you, dear audience, GFCE community. And I hope to see you after this meeting for a informal cocktail reception here in the Marriott Hotel in the K3 courtyard. That's opposite the reception desk of the hotel. And I would like to remind you that your GFCE badge will serve as an entrance ticket for the cocktail. So thank you very much. Hope to see you during the cocktail and on Friday when we are going to present the brilliant communique. Thank you and have a nice day.